Welcome. Happy Monday. Good morning. I'm so glad to see so many of you here. It is a privilege to be with you today, and I'm really looking forward to our time together. Um, to get started, just a few introductions. My name is Dr. Brenna McCormick, and I am the Secondary ELA Education Associate at the State Department of Education in the Office of Assessment and Standards on the standard side of the office. Big title that just means I support high school English teachers in the implementation of these standards. One of my kind of pet projects or passions, however, is to also support administrators and to make sure that, excuse me, you all have the support you need to support your teachers. So that is my goal for today, is to pass along some of that support. And I would love to know who is in the room with us, this virtual space. So if you'll take just a moment in the chat, put your name, the district you're in, and your position. Who do you serve? Good morning, everyone. All right, Berkeley, some principals, department head. We've got some teachers in here. I love that. Instructional coaches, principal, Florence principal. Excellent. APs, assistant principal, admin assistant. Good. I love to see how much of the state we're representing here today. Lee County, Lexington 4, Charleston, Fairfield County. Shout out to Fairfield. That's where my daughter goes to school. So love that. All right, we have some district support staff. Excellent. One of the things that I love most about the virtual space is that we can pull together so many people from across the state to learn together. And so I'm really looking forward to the conversation we're going to have today. So again, you do have a note catcher, and I'm going to put that link in the chat again. You will notice that there will be icons on some of the slides. They're this yellow circle, and they'll have a number in them. And that tells you on your note catcher which box we're working in. So if you see like a number 1 icon on the screen, that means we're on box number 1 in your note catcher. So I just hope that helps you kind of stay aligned to what we're doing as we move forward. And then finally, for housekeeping, if you will please take a moment and complete our attendance form. We like to keep up with who we are serving and supporting in the state, and the attendance form helps with that. So if you will please take just a moment, open your note catcher and fill out the attendance form. And I will put those in the chat one more time. All right, let's get started. So we are happy to announce that we can now offer 1 hour of recertification credit for each hour of webinar participation. There are 3 requirements for receiving that recertification credit. So we ask that you attend the webinar live and have active participation, which, good news, you all have checked that box already. You must remain in attendance for the duration of the webinar, and then you must complete the attendance form at the beginning of the webinar and the feedback form at the end of the webinar. So if you can do those 3 things, we'll make sure you get a recertification certificate in your email within the next week. Today's session is really separated into two parts. So the first half or first part is going to be informational. So we're going to talk about the new ELA standards and how they represent interconnected and recursive literacy skills. We're going to go over a standards document overview and then a support document and resource overview. So we will do that. And then part two will be the application piece. So what does this actually look like for you as an administrator or support staff or coach, a lead teacher? How can you align the expectations in our new standards to the South Carolina Teaching Standards 4.0 rubric? And then we're going to practice using a couple scenarios. Our purpose for today is to empower school administrators with the essential tools and strategies needed to effectively align teacher evaluation practices with our new 2024 SCCCR ELA standards. So my goal by the end of this is that you feel better equipped and empowered to support teachers as they implement these standards. So I would like for you for just a moment, it's in your note catcher in box 1, but I'm also going to put this in the chat, to read this short article by educator and author Carol Ann Tomlinson. As you read, I want you to choose one phrase or sentence that really draws your attention and then put that in the chat with an explanation as to why it stood out to you. So I'm going to give you 4 or 5 minutes just to read the short article, choose a phrase or sentence, and put it in the chat. All right, I'm seeing some responses in the chat. Melissa, that's a great one to point out. I'm often more aware of my weaknesses than my strengths. So it's important to focus on those positives as well. Ideal evaluator would help me construct my own options for how I might use feedback. Several people put that one. Several people says that the evaluator would work from the belief that no teacher ever finishes growing. Everyone has the capacity to improve. Very good. So the phrase that I picked out matches what some of you have also put, is that the word assess comes from the Latin root meaning to sit beside. For teachers, as for students, the most effective evaluation comes from someone who sits beside us and helps us grow. And one of my goals today is for us to sit beside one another in an effort to grow as evaluators, coaches, leaders, mentors, to ensure that we are as equipped as we can be to effectively, accurately, and knowledgeably evaluate and support teachers who are fully implementing the new ELA standards this academic year. So it's happening. In the chat or with your little emojis, give me a thumbs up if you've ever seen or used Johari's window. It's a tool for increasing self-awareness and honing leadership skills. I see a couple thumbs up. Some yeses. Awesome. Okay, so in a nutshell, this is a tool that was created by Joseph Luft and Harrington Ingham in 1955, so it's been a while, but it's designed to help individuals understand their relationships with themselves and others, and it uses this 4-quadrant model that illustrates different aspects of self-awareness and communication. So as leaders, we know that it's really important for us to have a strong emotional intelligence, and this idea of a Johari's window is an invitation to just be introspective in order to be better prepared to offer support to teachers. So the 4 quadrants, you have an open area, sometimes called the arena. This is where there's things like behavior skills, attitudes, experiences that you know about yourself and everybody else knows that about you as well. For me, I'm a little type A. A little bit of a perfectionist. Everyone around me can see that clearly. I know that about myself. There is a blind area. This is your blind spot. So habits, traits, or behaviors that other people know about me, but I don't know about myself. I'm just not aware of. You have a hidden area, which is the facade. So this is things about myself that I keep hidden, feelings, fears, experiences that I just choose not to share. And then there's the unknown. So what we don't what we don't know, what we don't know, right? So it's information about ourselves that is unknown to both the individual and to others. Things like potential, undiscovered traits, behaviors, abilities that could emerge when put in a different circumstance that you've never been in. So what I'm going to do now is show you a couple of characteristics that an administrator has put in her boxes of Johari's window regarding supporting the implementation of the new ELA standards. So this is a administrator who is familiar with the key components of the standards. Everybody can see she's regularly attending professional development sessions, collaborating with ELA teachers, providing support and resources. Other people can see that she doesn't quite fully understand the complexity of certain standards. This administrator came from a math background, so she's not 100% familiar with all of the ELA content. And it seems like she doesn't fully recognize the challenges teachers face in integrating the standards. Secretly hidden, she's uncertain about the best methods to evaluate teacher performance using the new standards because she's not from the ELA background. She feels a lack of confidence in interpreting some of the more nuanced aspects of the standards, like what really is the difference between point of view and perspective. And she's worried about potential resistance from teachers who are accustomed to the old standards. We've all come in contact with the teacher who's like 1 year from retirement and she's not changing anything. Ain't nothing you can do about it, right? So my imaginary administrator here is a little worried about those folks. And then the unknown to everyone. Discovering new methods for effective teacher evaluations aligned with the standards, uncovering innovative instructional strategies that can help teachers, and then identifying additional professional development opportunities. So my ask for you is to think through the lens of this sample administrator and notice where you see yourself. Just reflect on your own practices for a moment. There's space for you to do that in box 2 of your note catcher. What quadrant do you see yourself most in? Where are your strengths? Where might you need to shore up some practices? And just take a moment. If you'd like to unmute and share something or put something in the chat, that is fine, but you don't have to. We're going to come back to this later on in this session. So I'm going to give you just a few minutes to think. Okay, so when I reviewed the registration list for this webinar, we had 592 registrants, which is amazing, but 66% of the registrants stated that they had never attended previous State Department training on the new standards. So that being said, I wanted to make sure that we take the time to lay a strong collective foundation of the key features of the standards document, the most notable shifts, and the available support resources. So for some of you, this may be brand new and it might feel a little overwhelming. Remember that this session is recorded and you will receive the slide deck. So you will get a copy of this presentation. You have your note catcher that has all the resources linked, and I'm only an email away. So anytime you want to digest or reflect, I'm here to help with that. For others, this will be a review, so I encourage you to view the information through a different lens. If you're an administrator, what does your brand new to teaching staff need to know? If you're a coach, where will your veteran teachers need support? So if this is a review for you, let's approach it from a different lens. So we're going to start with an overview of the standards. The timeline, the new standards were approved in January of 2023. And then in the spring and summer of 2023, my team here at the State Department began preparing for standards introduction. So developing professional development, developing support documents, and then from 2023 to 2024, which is this last year that just finished, we were supporting that transition. So we were out in the field delivering professional development. We were doing webinars just to help everybody get prepared. Now this year coming up, 24-25, beginning in for some of you next month, July, others August, the 2024 standards are going to be fully operational and assessed. So that means come state testing time, SC Ready, EOC, you will be assessing on these new standards. So we want to make sure everybody understands that we are moving both feet on the ground, full force, new standards. Good news comes with the new standards is that there was a significant reduction in the standards and indicators from 2015 to 2024. So we went from 6 strands to 4. We went from 44 standards to 24 standards, and indicators from 116 indicators to 51 indicators. As administrators, teachers, coaches, what's your initial thought about that? You can unmute or put it in the chat. Yay. Yes, Sean, allows for more depth. I'm going to show you a standards map in just a few minutes that all the indicators fit on one page. One page, right? That's crazy talk. So yes, we can really focus in and dive deeper into these concepts. So if you're interested in the percentages, that's a 33% reduction in strands, 50% reduction in standards, 56% reduction in indicators. We have gotten several questions from administration or district level staff about the priority standards. So I do want to let you know that there are no state developed priority standards for the 2024 document. Excuse me. The priority standards for the 2015 standards were developed and released in response to COVID-19 and the need to support and maximize instruction during remote learning. But because of this significant reduction in material in these new standards, we don't need those priority standards anymore. They're succinct, which negates the need because now there's capacity for all standards to be priority standards. Many districts or schools will still choose to create a list of maybe what I've heard them called like power standards. They take data really and come up with their own kind of focus standards to really support specific student needs. That is still an acceptable practice, but we encourage districts who choose to do that to continue to be intentional about teaching all grade level indicators with fidelity. It's important to focus our instructional attention on the vertical progression of the standards that's located in Appendix A and B of our standards document, because with these standards, each grade level indicator is absolutely essential. So if we miss the instruction of even one indicator in the progression, there's going to be a gap in students' academic career long term. So if you choose to make power standards for your district, that's a-okay. Just make sure that you are still placing that focus and emphasis on the entire vertical progression. So if you look at pages 6 and 7 of the standards document, you'll notice that there are some coding charts, tables, graphs there. All of the standards are coded in the same way. They begin with the subject, which is ELA, followed by the grade level. In this particular example, grade 6. The strand, in this particular example, it's AOR, which is applications of reading, followed by the standard, which is 2 here, and the indicator 1. So that seems like a lot, but the good news is as we move forward, other subject areas will be following the same model. So you'll see some continuity across content areas. Each strand has its own code. Our Foundations of Literacy is coded F. Applications of Reading, you'll see AOR. Research is R. And Written and Oral Communications is C. Now, we do also include in this chart the overarching expectations, but I do want to be clear that the overarching expectations are not a strand or standards, and we'll talk more about that later, but they are coded, so we put them in this chart, and that code is OE. If you're looking at a digital version, or perhaps you've gotten real fancy and printed a color copy of the standards, you'll notice that they are also color coded. So Foundations of Literacy is purple, Applications of Reading green, Research is blue, Communications red. Now, as an aside, I did mention that this is located in the front matter of our standards document. It is highly recommended that teachers take the time to read through the front matter of this document. There is significant information that is critical for teachers to understand and know in order to apply standards with effectiveness and fidelity. We have created a reading guide called the One Bite at a Time reading guide that can help structure that. If you have teachers who need a little bit of structure going through that front matter. It's linked in your note catcher, box 3, and I've also put it in the chat. Okay, so we are going to talk now about interconnected and recursive literacy skills for just a minute and what that means with our standards. So in box 4, you have a link that opens up an excerpt from our standards document, and I've also put that in the chat. And I want you to take a moment to scan, read this excerpt and think about 4A's. What assumptions the author might hold? What does this mean for the support you will need to provide for teachers? What do you agree with? Maybe what's missing? And how this might impact teachers' planning and instruction, and how it might impact your observations and coaching. So I'm going to be quiet for just a minute. Again, the link is in the chat, also on your note catcher box 4. And I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to just skim that passage on interconnected and recursive literacy skills and reflect. Good, Amanda. Thank you for that. As you finish, if you want to start putting some of your thinking in the chat, you are welcome to do that. Okay, Beth. Scarborough's rope. I love that. All parts of literacy learning are interconnected. Yes. Increasing complexity, supporting one skill will support all of the others. Yes. Mm. I love that, Sherry. Writing deepens comprehension. All right, I'm going to have to stop on Varnita. I hope I said your name right. The standards offer a great opportunity for more collaboration and vertical planning. And that's a soapbox, girl. I will get on and we're going to talk about that later, but you're exactly right. Very good. Yes, critical. All right, so I have a question now that you've kind of thought about that pretty quickly, but you skimmed it, thinking through those 4 A's. When do we teach British literature? When do we teach American literature? When do we teach The Monkey's Paw or Romeo and Juliet? It's kind of a trick question. So I'm asking that very pointedly because there is no expectation that certain things are taught at certain grade levels. That content specific teaching, like, 11th grade is British literature or 12th grade is American literature, whatever it should be, or whatever it used to be, that has not been our standard since 2008. So there should not be an emphasis on when specific types of literature or specific text are taught. We are skills based in ELA, right? Not content. So it's not like social studies or math where it might be a specific content. We're all about the skills, the interconnected and recursive literacy skills. So whatever text you choose to teach with is fine as long as we're teaching the skills through that text, right? We don't teach Romeo and Juliet. We don't teach The Monkey's Paw. We teach comprehension strategies. We teach theme, how the author develops that. So I really want to kind of help shift the thinking for our teachers, particularly our secondary teachers who may still be in that very much mindset that like, oh, I teach British literature, because that's not really the case. In ELA in South Carolina, we're skills based over content based. All right, so I mentioned that we moved from 6 to 4 strands. So our 4 strands again are foundations of literacy, applications of reading, research, communications. And we're going to take a look at those 4 strands by reviewing the explanation of strands, which is another really valuable piece of our front matter in the in the standards document. So again, we're going to skim and scan the explanation of strands. You can annotate by noting anything that's kind of an aha or a big idea for you, and then consider how this is going to impact your work. So again, just take a moment to just review the 4 strands and what's included in them. This is box 5 on your note catcher, and I've also put it in the chat. Thank you, Beth. Yeah, getting back to the basics. Yes, handwriting is specifically referenced. Um, that's a big deal for our elementary folks. What else are you noticing about the strands and how it can impact your work as administrators, observers, coaches, creating those I can statements, depth rather than breadth, getting teachers away from structured TDA responses as the only writing instruction. Yeah, we are absolutely going to need to focus on all three modes of writing. That vertical articulation is crucial. Understanding the big picture. That's right. Again, expanding on the interconnectedness. So as administrators or coaches, when you're walking into classrooms to support teachers, we're looking for things to not be taught in isolation. Very good. Maggie, yeah. Foundations of Literacy is really for that K2 with a couple things that reach into 3-5. Okay, now that you kind of have an understanding of those four strands and their overall meaning, we're going to look at 6 key features of the standards document itself. So if you're looking at the standards document to help support teachers, these are the 6 big things that you might want to know. There is a standards map. We have grade level entrance statements. We have obviously the standards and indicators. We have a new tool called the Indicator Insights, overarching expectations, and then the appendices. So we'll start with the standards map. And I mentioned earlier that it is miraculous that all of our standards and indicators fit on one page. So this is it, guys. This what you're looking at right now is in the front matter of your standards document. That's it. That's all the standards and indicators for ELA, which I jumped out of my chair the first time I saw that they fit on one page. It's so great. So with Foundations of Literacy, there are 4 standards and 23 indicators. Applications of Reading has 10 standards and 14 indicators. Research has 1 standard but 5 indicators. And then written and oral communications is 9 and 9. So 9 standards and 9 indicators. So this is a really great, like, kind of at a glance look at our standards and indicators. And it's right at the front of our standards document. Another tool that is included before each grade level's specific standards and indicators are called grade level entrance statements. These give a quick snapshot of what's going to happen in that grade level. So, what are students going to read? What are they going to write? What can you expect? I'm going to put the link to this grade level entrance statements document that has all of them in one in the chat for you. It's also in your note catcher. But if you just look at the 3rd grade example for a minute, I want you to consider how might teachers in your building use this resource and how might it be useful to you as a tool? Yes, Shalia, that is exactly the point that I was going to make. What a great overview for families. If I was in the classroom, I'd print this out and staple it to my syllabus, right? Let parents know what they can expect that year for their students. So, again, another great tool to use outside of just teachers having the standards document. Now, what we're all here for, the standards and indicators. So, one thing that my team has noticed as we've been out in the state is that the term standards and indicators are often used synonymously. I was going to say simultaneously. I was like, that's not right. Synonymously. And they are actually 2 different things. So I want to ask you all to help me and my team with this language shift to make sure that we are using standards when we mean standards and indicators when we mean indicators. So what's the difference? Standards represent what students should know and be able to do by the end of their academic career. They are the same, kindergarten through English 4. So if You ask a teacher what standard they're teaching. Whatever they give you, if they give you a standard, it's going to be the English 4 expectation because it's the same, kindergarten through English 4. That's because it's the end goal, the destination for a student's entire academic career. Indicators, on the other hand, are what students are expected to learn by the end of that specific grade year. They're measurable, they're progressive, they're developmentally appropriate. Together, they're the foundation for instructional planning. But in ELA in South Carolina, we teach indicators. And it might seem like it's just a matter of semantics, but that intentional language is important, particularly with our new ELA standards. The vertical articulation is so crucial. Each person at each grade level has to do his or her part in teaching the indicators and the language of the indicators in order for students to be prepared for each subsequent grade level's learning. I know when I was in the classroom and an admin would come in and would say, hey, where's your standard? It would be RL 5.1 on the board all year because we're always making inferences and citing evidence, right? It's always there. But when I could focus in on a specific indicator, really makes my planning a lot more intentional. So as you're working with teachers, as you are coaching, observing, giving support, encourage them to think deeply about the indicators at their grade level, not the overall end goal standard, if that makes sense. Any questions about that or comments? Perfect. So when you look at the standards document itself, this is just an example. This is AOR 1 and AOR 2. You'll see that at the top is the strand. You have the standard. They are bolded, underlined, and then the indicators underneath that standard. So for this example, quiz, what grade is this? I saw some people say it. This is third grade. Yes, and put some fingers up. Yeah, third grade. So this is excellent. Third grade AOR 1.1, 1.2, 2.1, and 2.2. You may have also noticed this big gray box. This is an indicator insight. And indicator insights provide understanding to the language of the indicator for the classroom teacher. The language that is included in this section builds upon previous indicator insights, so you can refer back to previous grades. These insights are not to confine students or teachers into certain performances, but to just provide a starting point for instruction. They are not intended to provide clarification for assessment. Rather, they are intended to assist in the understanding of the indicator itself. In this particular indicator insight for grade 3, it lets you know that instruction can go beyond the listed terms and should include all previously learned terms. You may notice that there are some indicators that don't have insights. We only included indicator insights for indicators that could be better understood, with insights into support document resources, definitions for some terms within the indicator, or connections to later or prior language. So not all indicators have insights. I mentioned the overarching expectations earlier, and do again want to reiterate that the overarching expectations are not a strand and they're not standards. They are an articulation of evolving learning expectations. And if you were familiar with the 2015 standards, you'll notice some language that was pulled from those standards. Things like collaboration, citing evidence, making inferences, reading and writing for a variety of purposes. That used to be in the 2015 standards. But when the standards writers sat down, they said, you know what, these are just the fundamental skills and processes that are interwoven into the fabric of ELA at each grade level. We call it the business of how we do ELA. And quite frankly, if you look at these, it's the business of how we do every subject, right? These are the things that should be happening in all classrooms and all content areas. This is the expectation of students as readers, writers, and communicators over the course of K-12 ELA education. So while they are not assessed standards per se, this is what you should be looking for when you're in classrooms. Are students collaborating? Are they creating quality work by adhering to whatever accepted format they've been given? Are they reading and writing for a variety of purposes? So within the overarching expectations in the standards document, we've also included a progression statement for each, and it gives you a little bit of an idea of what that might look like in grades K2, 3, 5, and then 6 through English 4. So if you're like, well, I mean, what does it actually look like for a kindergartner to make an inference? This gives a little bit of insight into that. How is that different from when a grade 6 student makes inferences? You can look at these progressions and get a better idea. So now I have a challenge for you. I want you to take a closer look at the overarching expectations and the progressions. I'm putting them in the chat. They're also in box 7 of your note catcher. And I want you to review them, rank them in order of importance. So which do you think is the most important? That'll be your number 1. Which do you think is your least important? That'll be your number 6. Explain that reasoning and then stop there. So I'm going to give you about 3 minutes, not a lot of time, but about 3 minutes to put these in order of most important to least important. How many of you immediately knew your order, your ranking? How many of you are fighting with yourself of which one is more important? And how many of you say, none of them, you can't, they're not vertically aligned, they're horizontally. They're all happening in this cyclical, this happens so this can happen, and that happens so that can happen, and they really don't have an order. Would you agree with me on that? Yes. So if you do this activity with teachers, for example, one thing that we do often is when we get to that reason part, where we ask them to explain the reason, we put the individual teachers in groups and like force them to duke it out, right? And come up with a consensus. So as a group, you have to decide 1 to 6, the order of importance. And it comes down to the exactly the same thing that I bet that you all are seeing and thinking, is that there is no order of importance, right? They are all essential for effective reading, writing, communicating skills. So my question now is, when you're observing teachers or supporting, coaching, whatever it may be, what do you expect to observe students or teachers doing if the overarching expectations are being prioritized? What is your look for going to be when you walk into a classroom and you want to see the overarching expectations? What do you see? And it could also be, what do you hear? I guess. What do you see? What do you hear? Interaction, discussion. Yes. Collaboration, interacting with text, explaining their thinking, conversation, working together. Yes. Teacher as facilitator. Love that, Kathy. High engagement. Yeah. ELA classrooms, you should visibly be seeing their learning, right? Student-centered creativity. Love that. Laurie, I love that. No more sage on the stage, right? Teacher's not in the front of the room. Student work is on display. I love that, Michelle. The teacher's walking around, interacting with students, collaboration. Absolutely. Very good. Academic discourse. Students lead discussions. Very good. So the final piece of the standards document that I want to point out are the appendices. You have A, B, and C. A is your foundations of literacy standards in a grade band articulation. B is the vertical progression of spiraled standards. And then C are the acknowledgments of the document. We're going to focus on A and B. This is a snapshot of Appendix A. And again, this is your foundations of literacy. And they have them horizontally listed, kindergarten first to second. Your standard will be at the top, and then you have that grade band articulation from left to right. It's just another way to look at that progression. And then you have Appendix B, which is the same thing, but it includes the rest of our strands. So your foundations of literacy, your research, and then applications of reading, research, and communications. The standard is at the top, and these are vertical articulations. So they start with English 4 at the top and go down to kindergarten. In our support documents that we're going to look at in just a minute, you'll see that there is another version of Appendix B. It is this exact thing, but it also includes the indicator insights on the right-hand side, and that is a great tool. Another thing I want to point out, and put a little star by this, jot it down because you're going to need this information later, is that in the vertical articulation, you may notice that there are bolded words. Now, oftentimes when you see bolded words, you think, oh, that's defined in a dictionary somewhere, right, in the glossary. But in this case, in the vertical articulation, it represents when that particular concept or skill is introduced. So in this example, the first time students are really going to talk about argument is grade 5. Validity of claims shows up for the first time in English 2. So this means that English 2 teachers are 100% responsible for introducing this skill and teaching it, right? Our grade 4 teachers are responsible for introducing evidence and teaching it. And if they don't, guess who's going to hurt? Grade 5, right? Because they're going to have missed that really valuable skill. So it's important to remember vertical articulations, those bolded words. All right. So let's wrap up this review of the standards document itself. And I want you to write 2 sentences or less to summarize your learning so far, and put that in the chat. Then you're going to interact with a colleague by leaving a comment on one response in the chat. So let's do those 2 things first. So 2 sentences or less, summarize your learning, and then respond to a colleague. All right, I love this. I'm seeing some really great comments. If you're like me, your chat's constantly moving. You're going to have to just pick one and respond. Oh, I love that. Love that, Amy. You guys are awesome. Like, we're done, right? Y'all have learned everything you need to know. All right, my last ask for you in this little reflection is to set a goal. And some of you have already done this based on your learning as an observer, as a coach. What's your goal going to be moving forward? Mm, love that. Strengthen the walkthroughs, ensure skills-based instruction, read the overviews for English 1 through 4. Absolutely. Vernita, I love that. Gave me chills. Capital W-E, we, right? Walk with teachers as we unpack and begin to work with these standards. Sit beside each other, right? Excellent. Use the word indicators rather than standards. Yep, that's a small step we can all take, right? Learn and grow together. You love the overarching expectations for classroom walkthrough. Cheryl, I've got a tool for you that you are going to love that's going to help with that. Excellent. Thank y'all so much for interacting so thoroughly in that. I see a lot of things that make me really excited about the work that you all are going to do moving forward. So now we're going to do a quick overview of what support is already available for teachers and for you. Because oftentimes this can feel like a really overwhelming time when things are changing. And we know that you guys probably need as much, all the support that you can get, because this isn't the only thing you're doing, right, as administrators, as ELA. So we already have several support documents published. Um, sorry, I got distracted because I was reading that comment, and Michelle, have a tool for you today that I'm going to give you to help with that. So the support documents that we already have published, we have a standards crosswalk that shows the changes from 2015 to 2024. We have gifted and talented insights. We have a glossary, a grammar and conventions matrix, an infographic that's just how to navigate this document, multilingual learner insights, a research support document, a rhetoric support document and supplements. Side note, rhetoric now has moved down to middle school, so our 6th grade teachers are going to need some support there. Special education insights, vertical articulation with indicator insights, vocabulary support document, a kindergarten to early learning crosswalk, text complexity support document, foundations of literacy support document, and then another document to support the foundations of literacy is the indicator aligned inventory for word recognition. So that's a lot. And that in itself can feel overwhelming, right? Something that you really want to take the time to look through and see what's going to be most valuable. And I do have a way to kind of narrow that focus that I'll show you in just a minute. But I do want to give you just a second to review some of these. Specifically, I want everyone to take a look at the glossary. This is the most universal of the support documents, as it is a comprehensive document capturing instructional and assessment friendly definitions according to indicator intent for all grade levels. So I want to point out that the definitions in this glossary were crafted by hand by this team to align with the standards and indicators. We referenced other glossaries or dictionaries, but you're not going to find like a dictionary.com definition in here. We read the indicators, figured out what the intent for that specific word was, and created and crafted these definitions. So they will match what you see in assessment. They will match what the intent is in the indicators. So this is a great tool for common language across the board. So on box 9, you do have a graphic organizer if you choose to use it, and it's kind of a what, so what, now what. It asks you to choose a document and say, what's in the document? Why does the information matter? And how can you apply this instructional resource to your practice as an administrator or evaluator? So I'm going to give you 5 or 6 minutes, not a lot of time, but just enough to kind of get your feet wet. Open the glossary. Again, the links are on your note catcher. And then maybe open another document or two and just peruse for a moment. Um, see what there is there to support you and your teachers. My middle school teachers, you may want to focus on rhetoric. High school teachers tend to love the grammar and conventions matrix. So my teach support staff for our littles, maybe the Foundations of Literacy support document. But I'll give you about 5 or 6 minutes to look through those. Lots of love for the glossary in the chat. And yes, it is essential to have that common language. It is a win. Yes, Chadwick. Max, yes, that grammar and conventions matrix, super helpful. It takes the information and communications 4.1 and puts it in a matrix form so that you can see where skills are introduced. Foundations of Literacy crosswalk. Again, we could spend an entire 2 hours just going through these support documents. I just wanted you to know where they were, have links directly to them, and get your feet wet. I encourage you to do the same with your teachers. Give them the what, so what, now what graphic organizer and have them look at some of interest to them, um, because they're going to be um, really great tools, I think. And a lot of these come with webinars that we have already recorded, and we will show you how to get to those in just a moment. So the next slide I'm going to show you, I'm going to tell you now, don't get overwhelmed. It's going to look like a lot on the screen, but it's not. It's actually 4 separate documents, okay? So what we have done is we created infographics for each grade band that we narrowed down what we would consider to be our top 10 shifts or top 10 noticings in each grade band. Because this can be overwhelming when we're shifting to new standards and you have so much support that you don't know where to start, we thought it would be really helpful for teachers and those that support teachers to have a starting point. I can't do it all, but I can do these 10 things, right? I can focus on these 10 things. So what you'll see on the screen are the infographics for all of the grade bands. I put the link in the chat, but you can also find them on box 10 on your note catcher. And I want you to just take a moment to look at the infographic for the grade bands you serve and think how you might be able to use this as your in your work as an administrator or evaluator and how teachers might be able to use this. So again, I'll just give you about 3 minutes. Love that, Laurie. Susan, me too. I like things that are pretty, right? Pretty to look at, easy to look at. Yes, Sonia, thank you for pointing that out because I meant to say it. Earlier when I said I have a tool to help you kind of narrow down which support documents are going to be the most helpful for you. If you look at the bottom of each of those infographics, it lists 4 support documents. We chose the 4 that we thought had the most relevance to that particular grade band. So again, if you're feeling overwhelmed by 18 support documents, that kind of helps you narrow it down to 4. They are, in fact, Margaret, active links. Um, and that can be your starting point if you're feeling like, what do we do? We start here with these 10 shifts, these 4 support documents. Another tool we have for you is called the cross-check method. This is a template that we developed to guide educators through the development of an intentional indicator-aligned instructional series. So I've already seen somebody put it in the chat, that idea of like unpacking the standards. Good news is these are pretty unpacked already and easy to understand. But if you have standards that are brand new to your grade level, for example, 6th grade with your rhetoric, if you have indicators that you know are going to be particularly difficult to teach because it's just a difficult concept, this is a tool that you can use to help with that. So the cross-check method is informed by specific grade level indicators. And it's a tool that helps teachers consider scaffolded questioning, rigor and content expectations, success criteria, assessment opportunities, mini lessons. It just really guides teachers through that thinking process. Here's what it is not: mandated or required. Okay, so hear me say, the State Department is not coming to your room to see, are your teachers using the cross-check method? This is an optional tool, okay, designed specifically for understanding the new and or difficult to teach indicators. So in no way, shape, form, or fashion do you have to use this process because it is pretty involved. But if you've got a certain indicator that is, oh, I see that you just lost. Yeah, that was weird. Thank you for letting me know. If you've got specific indicators that are kind of difficult to tackle, this is something that can help you through that. Now, on your note catcher in box 11, you have several completed examples as well as blank templates, resources for understanding and using this, a webinar that we did on the cross-check method, all kinds of resources. Open one of these examples up and just take a look. How could this tool be useful to you as an administrator, a coach, or an evaluator? Love that, Susan. Yes, use in PLCs. And again, not every indicator has to, to go through that process because it's long. But the ones that we're unsure about, that's a great tool. Yes, absolutely. Another tool to put in your back pocket. One of my very favorite tools that I get to share now is the Standards app. If you didn't know, we have an app for that. So you can scan that QR code with your phone and get the app on your phone, or there is also a web-based app that you can use. So every resource that I have mentioned today um, and will create in the future is on this app for easy access. So if you're doing observations and you're like, gosh, what was that indicator again? And you're in a third grade classroom, you can just pull up the standards and indicators for third grade right on your app and take a look at them. So this is another really great tool. You do have the QR code and the desktop link on your note catcher as well on box 12. Give everybody a second who wants to take a look. Because it is a web-based app, when you scan the QR code, you should get a pop-up that says add to my home screen. If you do not get that pop-up, there should be a button somewhere on the bottom where you can press and then it gives you the option to add to your home screen. If you have any trouble at all, just email me or one of my teammates. We'll help you get that app on your phone. All right, one more tool to show you, and then we're going to move into some application. So if you were able to attend the I3 conference last week for administrators, and you had the option to attend a session on the new standards there. And the presenter, Casey Cook, shared this as kind of the takeaway or the kind of gift for attending that session. And it's the administrator's quick reference guide to the 2024 SC CCR ELA standards. If you were not at that conference and you want part one, I'm giving it to you right now. Oh, it's in the link and it's also on your um, note catcher. But part one includes the what and why of academic standards, some quick facts about the standards, the overarching expectations, the recursive literacy skills we talked about, all of your standards and support document quick links, professional development support, support for an implementation plan, and then some FAQs that are relevant specifically to administrators. Um, but what I'm most excited about is part two of this tool. No one has had this yet. And let me say that you are my guinea pigs, okay? My pilot group, we shall call you. So if you choose to use the tool I'm about to show you, I would love, 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 and value feedback. whether it's a spelling error, a standards error, or like I don't understand this, please reach out and let me know, because I want to make sure that this tool that I'm about to show you is useful and accurate and effective. Um, Part 2 is a coaching checklist for the standards. Um, so it's designed to support school leaders as they conduct coaching cycles to ensure instruction is evidence-based and aligned with the standards. Now, hear me say this. This tool is not intended to be evaluative, nor is it intended to replace the South Carolina Teaching Standards 4.0 evaluation rubric. Everybody heard that, right? We don't replace the standards evaluation rubric. This would be a coaching tool, an in-between evaluation tool. A teacher really needs some specific support. Here's where I can go to get that support. It also does not represent the full breadth of the 2024 ELA standards for each grade band. What it does include are the essentials, okay? The ELA essentials for K2, for example, target the 5 essential components for reading instruction as identified by the National Reading Panel. So what you'll see is phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. And then I've also added the overarching expectations. For 3, 5, 6, 8, and E1 through E4, they target those essential interconnected and recursive literacy skills outlined in the standards. So critical reading, literary analysis, written expression, oral expression, academic language and vocabulary, and research, and again, added overarching expectations. So you can see that it includes an introduction and overview for each of the grade bands, a coaching guide for pre-observations and post-observations, the indicator aligned expectations for each skill, and then some look-fors. So I will give you this full document. I haven't posted it yet, Susan. I'll give you this full document at the end. I'm going to make you hang around. But for right now, I'm going to show you what it looks like. So this is what just one little snippet of the pre and post observation coaching guide includes questions to kind of guide your conversation, asking teachers, hey, what ELA essentials are you focusing on? What overarching expectations should I be able to observe? And then a follow-up for that conversation. This is a little snippet of what your grade level expectations might look like. So on the left-hand side, you could see this is 3rd, 4th, and 5th critical reading, which indicators would align with that ELA essential skill, right, of critical reading. On the right-hand side, this is an example from your K-2 comprehension look-fors. So if a teacher says that they are going to be working on that comprehension piece, this is what you can look for. You should see explicit teaching of comprehension strategies, right? Monitoring comprehension, activating, connecting background knowledge. Students should be participating in discussions. So basically, if you have no ELA background, or this is brand new to you, or you're a new administrator, you're not sure where to start, you could walk into a classroom, have this checklist, and say, okay, I'm looking for these ELA essential skills, and this is what it should look like. So I really hope you find this tool to be valuable and that you really will give me feedback on it, because again, you are the first people to have laid eyes on this document, and I'm really excited about it as a tool for administrators, evaluators, support staff, coaches. So please, please, please give me feedback. And again, you'll get the link to part 2 at the end, so stick around. All right, so that wraps up our section on the support documents and all the resources that are available. So I want you to take a moment to decide what is the most important thing that you explored or learned is. Initially, we were going to do this in a breakout room, but just to make sure we have enough time to finish the entire session today, I want you to just do this individually. So everyone with a birthday close to today's date, you're in luck. You don't have to leave the breakout room. Just think for a second, what's your most important thing, and drop that in the chat. The most important thing that you explored or learned during the support document phase. Having links in one location, yes. Top 10 list. Wonderful. Good explicit information. Glossary provides common language. Yes, so important. Having a few minutes just to start perusing. I will say, I did not introduce my team at the beginning of this, and I just realized that like 10 minutes ago. My colleagues are on this call helping as well. We have Mandy Hawker, who's our elementary associate, and Casey Prince Harvey, who is our ELA support and standards support person, and they're texting me right now, hey, you forgot we did this, you forgot we did this. And I wanted to mention that there are webinars for all 4 of the top 10 infographics. You can find those in the app or on our instructional resources page. And then also just to mention that the part 2 of that admin reference guide was modeled after some work that other states do, particularly North Carolina. So just make sure they get their credit as well, that I kind of stole from their formatting because I thought it was really helpful. Okay, so let's get into some application. What does this mean for the standards, the teaching standards 4.0 evaluation rubric? Because like I said, that observation tool is a coaching tool, not a replacement for our actual evaluation tool. So how do these things align? There are 4 domains we know in that South Carolina Teaching Standards 4.0 rubric, but today, for today's purpose, we're just going to focus on the instruction domain. So we're going to hone in on the instruction domain. And within instruction, you probably know there's 12 indicators. So there's a lot going on in the instruction domain. We're only going to look at 6 of these indicators, but we're going to think through the lens of what ELA instruction could look like through those indicators. So we're going to focus on standards and objectives, motivating students, lesson structure and pacing, questioning, grouping students, and teacher content knowledge. So we're going to look through the lens of those 6 indicators. So in a moment, you'll get a document that has each of the 8, it has 8 key statements. And I've pulled these key statements from the exemplary criterion within the indicators in the instruction domain. So if you look at the 4.0 rubric, it sets it up, and then you obviously, teachers are shooting for exemplary, right? So I went through that exemplary column and picked out what I felt were key statements that aligned very closely with maybe some things that we need to be really closely looking for in ELA instruction. Picked 8 of them and made those our key statements. Underneath that, you'll see that the statement includes what an administrator could look for when making observations, and then what resources are available for teachers who may need additional support to master the key statement. And in the document that I'm going to give you, those resources are hyperlinked. So here's the example. Key statement number 1, again, pulled from the exemplary column of standards and objectives. All learning objectives and state content standards are explicitly communicated. What should you be looking for as an administrator or evaluator? Well, in ELA, that indicator language, it aligns with grade level content and rigor expectations. So we're not looking for standards language, we're looking for indicator language for that grade level. And we're also looking for skills-based objectives rather than text-based objectives. So you might see we are looking at suspense in a text, not reading the monkey's paw, right? So we want that specific skills-based objective. If a teacher is not quite meeting that exemplary mark, you might point them in the direction of the vertical articulations, the cross-check method to really think through the indicator alignment, the glossary, and we also have a team here in the Office of Assessment and Standards called Personalized Learning, who their whole job is just to help personalize learning, to take the things that teachers and students need and fit that into instructional practices. So as you look through these 8 key statements, I want you to consider what aligns with what you already do and what adjustments might you need to make moving forward. So you know what? I never really actually noticed whether it was a standard or an indicator that they're teaching. And now I need to be more focused on that, whatever that may be. So I have dropped that document in the chat, and I'm going to give you about 8 minutes to take a look, thinking about what aligns with what you already do and what adjustments you might need to make. As you have thoughts, feel free to put them in the chat. All right, I'm seeing some responses in the chat. Love that Chadwick said that focus on that tier 1 instruction and engagement, right? We can't intervene our way out of a tier 1 problem. Okay, so we want to make sure that that tier 1 instruction is grade level indicator aligned for all students. All students should be exposed to the grade level expectation. A greater focus on indicator language. Yeah, help stay focused on important stuff, not get too broad in conversations. I am guilty of that myself, including those overarching expectation skills. Yes, absolutely. Indicator language for teacher content knowledge. Yes. Just out of curiosity, put a 1 in the chat, like the number 1, if you come from a background other than ELA. So like if maybe you were a math teacher, science. Yeah. And that's kind of been my experience as well with administrators. I think in my 15 years, I had one administrator that had an ELA background. And not that, that means doesn't mean you're not capable, right? But it's a little bit of an unfamiliar territory sometimes. If you put me in a chemistry classroom and said, hey, observe these teachers. They could be teaching whatever they wanted and I wouldn't know the difference. So, um, love that. Yeah, it just makes you more comfortable, right? When assessing that ELA team. Love that. So, considering the overarching expectations, somebody just, mm, Stephanie, that's a good point. That some of the early childhood teachers, a lot of them do come from an ELA background. So, considering the overarching expectations, we talked about them earlier in the effects that we were looking at observable things in the classroom. Now, I want you to think about um, planning. Okay. So, if you're looking at um, instructional plans, what are you going to look for that might demonstrate that teachers have considered the overarching expectations intentionally? We've already talked about what we would see. Now I want you to think about planning and pre-observation coaching conversations. How will you know they're being considered? And Sherry, I actually had that conversation this morning. She said, great resource for those teachers that may need support but take feedback personally. Literally had that conversation this morning with my team lead about how it takes the personal out of conversations and it's just professional. Here's what the criteria says, right? So again, what are we looking for in instructional plans that demonstrate the teachers have considered the overarching expectations? Measurable goals. Yes, Melissa, I love that. How do we know we met them if there's no measurement scale, right? Clarity in the learning target, plans for collaboration and peer feedback. Love that. More than one opportunity for reading and writing experiences. Love this. What are the students doing? How are they going to show their learning? A selection of assessments in alignment to what students should know and be able to do. Um, what did my nanny more than one way to skin a cat, right? There's more than one way to show that you've learned something, that you know something, that you can do something. Excellent. So as we wrap up this thinking through the lens of the 4.0 evaluation rubric, I want you to consider what adjustments you might need to make to ensure that teachers consistently and effectively demonstrate the look fors that we've reviewed. So maybe not so much in your observation, but school-wide or district-wide or whatever realm you have control over, what can you offer support-wise for teachers to help this take place? And I'll give you one to kind of get you thinking. Provide structured and protected time for studying the new standards. Yes, that's exactly right, Casina. Right, what I was thinking. Specifically know what you're looking for. Chadwick, yeah, share these resources with the teachers. Take the observation checklist to your pre-conversation. Build in time to review PLC support. Models of exemplary observations. I love that, Rhonda. Isn't that what we do with our students? We give them models. That's an overarching expectation 6, actually. Right. So structured and protected time for teachers to plan vertically and across disciplines. A lot of talk about that in the chat already about that idea of vertical planning, working with teachers. I love that, Amanda. Um, time to explore your high quality instructional materials. We're getting new ELA standards. We're also getting new textbooks, right? So we've got to dive into those as well. So time to do that and to see how your new high quality instructional materials align with your standards and indicators, maybe what's done really well in those materials, what might need some supplement. Danielle, yep, you got letters as well for lots of teachers. So there's a lot happening at one time. And then instructional coaching, providing instructional coaching to include modeling. Yes, Dr. Fields, that time to reflect is crucial. All right, so let's, now that you all are experts in ELA standards and how to do all the things, let's do some scenarios to practice. We're going to do the first one together, and then I'm going to put you in breakout rooms for a few minutes to have some conversation. So here's our first scenario. Miss Johnson is a high school teacher known for her enthusiasm and passion for literature. She's committed to helping her students develop a love for reading and strong analytical skills. Miss Johnson's 11th grade English class is reading To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. The lesson objective, as written on the board, is to analyze key literary elements and understand their impact on the text. Miss Johnson begins the lesson by reminding students about the standard ELA AOR Point 1. Evaluate and critique key literary elements that enhance and deepen meaning within and across text. She explains that they will look at how literary elements like theme, character development, and symbolism contribute to the novel's overall meaning. What coaching support would you give to Miss Johnson based just on this scenario? And I'll give you a hint. Yes. The indicators, right? Be be mindful of those verbs. So Miss Johnson is teaching the standard, evaluate and critique. Students aren't expected to critique until English 4. So that is pushing them to a level that they may not be ready for. So the objective is broad and does not specifically target the grade level indicator for 11th grade. So her approach is really lacking depth and specificity required to meet the indicator at the appropriate grade level. So that may be a place that we coach. Now what I'm going to do, this is in your note catcher on 17, but I'm also going to put it in the chat. We're going to put you in breakout rooms, and we are going to ask you in the breakout room to just choose a scenario as a room. Doesn't matter which one. There's 4 or 5 more. Each of you will open a copy of the document that I've put in the chat, and then as a group, discuss the scenario, decide what feedback you would give, and then if you have time, repeat it with another scenario. So get as many as you can get done. When you get into the room, you've got to figure out who's been in administration the longest, because that's the person who's going to lead the conversation. And we're going to be in our rooms for about 8 to 10 minutes. Okay? Any questions about the directions? My team and I were popping in and out of the rooms and heard lots of really great conversation. So we appreciate that interaction. If you are anything like me, you want to know the answers, right? While there are many answers and no specific answer, I am very quickly going to share a couple of the things that I might have coached through in each of the scenarios. Again, remember that you will get this presentation and a follow-up email. So if you want to go back and use these scenarios or read all of them, you will have the quote-unquote answers to do that. So scenario 2 was Mrs. Thompson, and Miss Thompson was a 5th grade ELA teacher, engaging lessons, and she was working on compare and contrast. So the feedback for Mrs. Johnson was that she's given activities that are engaging and align with the standards, but she did not provide an opportunity for students to activate prior knowledge about primary and secondary sources. So if you look at that vertical articulation, you'll notice that primary secondary sources shows up for the first time in that grade level. So she would need a way to connect that new information to what they might already know or experience. And again, that's just one coaching point. For Mrs. Rivera, who is a 7th grade teacher teaching AOR 1.2, she's asking students to define similes, metaphors, and personification. We are way past the identification stage in grade 7. So our coaching point for her would be, let's move them to analysis. So how figurative language impacts mood, tone, and meaning, because her lesson is really focusing on those lower order thinking skills, such as definition and identification, rather than the higher order analysis required by the 7th grade indicator. Now, we all know there are students who are going to need support, who need remediation, who need whatever it may be, but all students have to be exposed to grade level expectations. Mr. Bennett is very much a sage on the stage. I think someone mentioned that early on in our presentation today. He needs to maybe incorporate some collaboration, classroom discussions, guided practice, small group instruction. I was in a group that chose this, and we're talking about the different ways he could do that. Very good. And then Miss Stevenson, I heard somebody talking about this too in a group, that her lesson did not align with the new Foundations of Literacy strand, which emphasizes that explicit phonics instruction, phonemic awareness, and the ability to decode words. She was really relying on memorization of sight words, contextual guessing, pictures, rather than the foundational skills necessary for early reading development. All right, so very brief work with some scenarios, and there's like a million things to focus on when it comes to the ELA standards, but I hope you have a better grasp of some of the things you can be looking for as you do observations. So our final kind of wrap up or reflection for this last piece is, I used to, but now I. So through the lens of an administrator, evaluator, coach, lead teacher, what did you used to think, do, look for, but now you will blank? Drop that in the chat. Oh, Amy, that was a heartwarming response. Makes me happy. Mm, thank you, Maggie. Yep, Cheryl, same thing as Maggie. Good. Mm, Laurie, I love that. I'm gonna have to go back and read all of these. I used to shy away from ELA, but now I feel confident. That was our goal. I love that, Stephanie. Mm, excellent, Irma. Yay, Chadwick. I love all these. All right, so we've got about 4 minutes left, and we're going to wrap up a little bit of clarity and closure. I told you at the beginning that we would come back to this Johari's window, this idea of really just being aware of ourselves and the way we're approaching what we're doing. Think about all the things you've learned over the last 2 hours. And I want you to consider a personal statement for one of these quadrants. So think about an maybe at one of your blind areas or your hidden areas or your unknown area, something now that's moved to your open area. How might you move forward by putting a statement into one of the areas of Johari's window? For example, a hidden area might be, um, like you're already saying, I feel more confident. Other people might not have known I was not confident, right? Maybe now in the open area, you know how to access resources. You know where to go to find professional development. You're more knowledgeable. We are all in this together and we'll work collaborative. I can't say the word. You know what I mean, Sean. Thank you. You're right. Goes back to that very first article we read of really sitting beside each other, right? You didn't know what you didn't know. That's right. Unknown. Now we know to look at that, read the resource documents. All right, friends. Whew. So as we finish up revisiting our purpose, was to empower school administrators with the essential tools and strategies needed to effectively align teacher evaluation practices with the standards. And I was going to ask in the chat to describe one way the purpose was met, but I think you're already doing that. That I can see in the chat that there has been a lot of growth and exposure to new things that maybe you didn't know existed before. So I'm really, really happy about that. The last thing that I'm going to ask you to do is to provide some feedback. And the good news is that the confirmation page from this feedback form will include the link to the admin guide part 2. So when you submit that page that pops up, we'll give you the link to part 2. Excuse me. And I really, really, really do value your feedback on this feedback form. This is our first administrator specific webinar. Um, and we had such a great turnout and it was so encouraging. And I would love to have your insight into how it went, what else could be offered specifically for administrators or coaches or other support staff. So put the feedback form in the chat for you. Take a moment to complete that, and remember on that last page, you'll get the link to the admin guide part 2, the coaching observation guide. And Mandy and Casey and I are also going to listen and linger for a little while, answer any questions that you might have. Once you complete the feedback form, you are welcome to head on to whatever commitment you have next, but we will be here to answer questions.